Good morning, everyone. Warm welcome to everyone who has joined us for today's webinar on assessing risks and vulnerabilities to climate change in cities. We already have quite a few participants, and I'm sure more will be joining us. I will start with the presentation so that we start with the webinar on time and we have enough time for the presentations and, of course, the questions and questions by the audience and the answers of presenters. Before we start, let me make a few housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be made available on the Covenant of Mayors website. All presentations that we will see will be shared with participants after the webinar. And very importantly, the audience is welcome to type in their questions to our presenters, as you can see in the chat window in the bottom right corner. So type in your questions there also while you are listening to the presenters, and we will have 2 question and answer sessions to address these questions. As you may have noted, this webinar is part of a series of webinars. They are dedicated on the topic of climate change adaptation in cities and urban settings. And the aim of these webinars is to cover the entire adaptation cycle. Today we're starting with the assessment of risks and vulnerabilities, and we will continue with the design of action plans, monitoring and evaluation of adaptation actions, as well as the financing of actions. Today, to walk us through the process of assessing risks and vulnerabilities, we have 2 city representatives, Maaike Wilhelmans from the city of Ghent in Belgium, and Jorge Cristino from the city of Guimarães in Portugal. After we listen to their presentations, the audience would have the time to ask their questions. Then we will benefit from the presentation of 2 tools on assessment of risks and vulnerabilities. Alexandra Kazmielczak from the European Environment Agency will present the Urban Adaptation Map Viewer, and Carlo Bontempo will present the various tools developed under the Copernicus program. However, before I give the floor to our speakers, whom you can see also in the small screens with their videos, I would like to remind us all about the place of adaptation within the Covenant framework. The Covenant of Mayors, through the Covenant of Mayors, local authorities in Europe are committing voluntarily to achieving the climate and energy target of the European Union. By 2030, this includes accelerating the decarbonization of cities through at least 40% reduction of greenhouse gases. In terms of adaptation, it's strengthening the resilience of cities through increasing the capacity to adapt, and we hope that this series of webinars on adaptation will facilitate this process. And finally, it's addressing the energy poverty pillar of the Covenant through allowing secure access to sustainable and affordable energy. In terms of the adaptation pillar, the Covenant framework covers different aspects, such as the development of a strategy, the risks and vulnerability assessment that we will address today, and developing, designing, prioritizing adaptation actions to address identified hazards and vulnerable sectors, as well as monitoring and evaluating these actions. These different aspects will be addressed through the upcoming webinar series, so please stay tuned and follow up what's coming in the next month. In order to assist local authorities in developing, implementing, and monitoring climate change action plans, the Covenant of Mayors Office, together with the European Environment Agency, has developed a tool called the Urban Adaptation Support Tool. It has been revised and updated earlier this year, so please check out the information contained therein. It has been tested and used by many covenant signatory cities to facilitate their adaptation planning and implementation of actions. And these tools takes you through the steps to develop and implement an action plan, contains also valuable guidance materials and tools. And in the next slide, you can see snapshots from the tool. In the yellow box, you can notice that it's divided with the main adaptation steps in the adaptation cycle, and there are different sub-steps. So this allows to choose which one is most relevant for you and focus on it, unless you would like to follow the entire cycle. The tool has been devised particularly for covenant cities, and the small icon of the covenant marks where the information is most relevant for the reporting of covenant cities. And finally, in the green box, you can see that each step and sub-step includes associated useful information, which could be helpful for you, including different reports, guidance and tools, materials, methodologies, and case studies, as well as outputs from ongoing projects. So I invite you to check out the Urban Adaptation Support Tool, being the main tool for covenant cities to plan and implement adaptation actions. And without further ado, I would like to give the floor to our first speaker, Maaike Bruggelmans. And once again, remind the audience that you are most welcome to write down your questions in the chat window while Maaike is presenting, so that we can address them later on. So with this, Maaike, I give you the floor.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Good morning. I hope everybody can hear me. Thank you for the introduction, Petya, and also for the invitation to share our experiences on climate adaptation with you. My name is Maaike Bruggelmans, and I'm a policy worker on climate adaptation for the city of Ghent. And let me start with a short introduction of Ghent. Ghent is situated in the Flemish region of Belgium. It's about 156 square kilometers with 260,000 inhabitants. We are about 50 kilometers away from the coastline, on average 8 meters above sea level with a maximum of 20 meters. An important factor, our soil ceiling is rather high. It's up to 41, or it's on average 41%, but up to 80% in the inner city. And it's important to have this kind of demographic and geographical information, as climate change impacts differ a lot between the different regions in Europe. In coastal areas, sea level rise might be the most problematic issue, while in other parts it can be rather heat or forest fires or mudslides or so on. So for Ghent, the main climate impacts considered are pluvial and fluvial flooding because of the high percentage of soil sealing and the precipitation extremes we expect. Also, heat stress is a main impact considered because of the build-up area, the existing urban heat island effect we are already measuring, and the higher temperatures and the more frequent and intense heat waves to come. And then a third aspect, but probably one of the most important ones for our region, is the water shortage we might experience because of our high need for water, our low water availability, and the longer periods of drought expected for our region. The effects of sea level rise are more on the long term, something to look at for our city. With our climate adaptation strategy and action plan approved by the Council in 2016, we want to avoid this, a city suffering from floods and heats, and make Ghent a climate resilient city by focusing on green and water within the city, eliminating these hardened surfaces, retaining water, allowing it to infiltrate, and so on. Ghent signed Mayor's Adapt in 2014, and the Urban Adaptation Support Tool Petja was talking about before was made available pretty early in the process to all signatories. It is a plan, do, check, act approach to set up a strategy. It is useful, but for us it was a rather theoretical approach to a climate adaptation strategy. And in practice, it is not always such a step-by-step approach that is followed. Often we work on different steps at the same time. So for our climate adaptation strategy, we translated the 6 steps into 8 pillars using a more horizontal structure. Our climate adaptation plan can be found on the internet, on our website. It's available in English for anybody interested to have a look at it. It is our experience that climate adaptation is very often about responding to opportunities. It is hard sometimes to introduce projects specifically or only from a climate adaptation point of view, and it has proven to us more useful to lift along with ongoing projects that have been planned, that have people working on it, and that also have budgets allocated to it. And the thing is to try to find a way to use these existing budgets to have a climate resilient design and a climate resilient project. So for our first climate adaptation strategy, we focused on the public domain of the city, as it's a duty of a local government to have this public domain developed, renewed, and we have also tools at hand as a local government to work on it. To introduce climate adaptation to these kind of projects, may it be a sewage project, renewing a street or a square, or bigger urban renewal projects of a whole neighborhood. To introduce climate adaptation, it's necessary, and it's one of the first steps, to have vulnerability maps available. Maps that can be used as a layer on top of the existing plans, designs, layers with other data for the project. Those kind of vulnerability maps, they create awareness. They also set spatial boundaries to the theme of climate change. They indicate priorities. They show which streets might be most vulnerable for flooding, which neighborhoods are vulnerable for heat, and so on. So they make the challenge of climate change adaptation more concrete, more tangible, and manageable. So in Ghent we have vulnerability maps for heat stress, indicating the most vulnerable area for heat stress. It's the area where there is a lack of green, where it's a densely built up area, and combined with the most vulnerable group of people living, young children, older people, also people with limited income and limited availability to adapt their houses and so on. This is a map for our flood. This is our flood map showing the areas vulnerable for flooding, both from river floodings, more in the outskirts of the city, as for pluvial flooding from intense rain events, which is more something for the inner city to look at. An important remark I wanted to share about those vulnerability maps is that you make sure they are correctly interpreted, because they often show a worst case scenario. They're made based on modeling, so they depend also on the modeling data available. And there is always a part of uncertainty in climate change. So it's important to kind of not only share the maps, but try to find a moment to also explain and give information what exactly is shown on this map, what exactly can you, which conclusions can you make, and which side remarks have to be taken into account. And one important aspect is that, for example, there is not always a one-on-one relationship between the location where the map shows where problems might become visible and the location where measures need to be taken then. So it's not because of a certain street being flooded in a certain event that only measures in this street need to be taken. They have to be taken in a much wider area. So it's important to share that information with the people working on the project. How did we come to these vulnerability maps? I think it's important to provide a specific budget for local study work. As I said before, the budgets for the projects can be used to introduce climate adaptation measures, but this first step, designing these vulnerability maps, is something very specific that needs local study work, and usually the services working on public domain and renewable urban projects don't have specific budgets for these. So that's something that, in our case, the Service on Climate and Environment provides. It's also important to involve local knowledge institutions and consulting offices. We have a university in Ghent, and the big advantage is their local knowledge of the city and the area. They also have the expertise in the modeling. They have data available, so they're very important partners to work along with. Points of attention is exactly this situation that vulnerability is based on modeling work. Modeling work has its limitation towards local scale, towards the local situation. Sometimes it's not downscaled enough to make conclusions for a concrete project at street level. So that's something that is still a limiting factor. Also, the data gathering to feed this model is very important and is also not always available or limited available on a local scale, which makes the results of the modeling work also less detailed. And then a very important step after the theory has been applied, the modeling work has been done, and the results are there, the maps are there, the numbers are there, is to make a translation or a check check the theory to practice, both with people who have practical terrain knowledge, people who know if streets have been flooded before, but also with the end users of the vulnerability maps to make sure that the work has been done in a way that is useful for them and the results can be taken along in the process. An important aspect that I wanted to share as well is with the maps, you often look into the effects. Where will the heat be highest in the city? But it's important to make also the translation into the impacts. What does this mean that a certain area suffers from heat? Is it an area where vulnerable groups, vulnerable people are located? Are there a lot of kindergartens? Are there hospitals? Are there older or facilities for taking care of older people? In flooded areas, are there vital infrastructure that might be impacted? Is there an impact on nature, for example? And also important, can we make a translation into economic impact? Can you allocate costs to the climate change effects? Yeah, it can be in euros, it can be in lost working hours. Those euros are important. I don't know what happens exactly, but I cannot see the presentation anymore.
Yes, now it's back.
Okay, we're back. Okay, thank you. So yes, this was a slide telling that next to effects, it's important to make the steps into impacts, and then the combination, of course, the likelihood an effect might occur and the impact it has to make your risk analysis. And then the following step, of course, from vulnerability studies, which is still usually a theoretical analysis. It's important to translate this into measures in practice. Try to make them tailor-made because measures might differ a lot depending on the possibilities within a certain area, a certain street, a certain neighborhood. We experienced that it's important to test new measures in pilot projects. There is some information available also on the Climate Adapt website or from other cities, but it's still important to test it in your own environment to see what is possible. And we had pilot projects that did not work out in the way we expected because, for example, we wanted to introduce this Stockholm tree where trees also have infiltration possibilities from the water that comes from the street and pavements. But it turned out there was not enough room available in the underground to do it in the pilot streets we had chosen before. But by doing this pilot project, all technical matters were looked into. There was a complete information sheet on technical issues, and it will be more easy to introduce it in a new project where it will be possible, having all this preparation done and having it ready for introduction. And the last thing I wanted to share is that for people designing public domain and making urban renewable projects, the theory is one thing, but seeing ambitious examples from other cities works very inspiring, and it shows that introducing climate adaptation, making climate resilient projects, it is possible. And sometimes that works best, that you can just show examples from other cities. I want to show this for an example in Ghent. We have this square, we're having little green. It's a complete paved area. Also, the streets around have little green. And we wanted to redesign it, make it a climate resilience square. And it worked well to introduce the examples, for example, from Rotterdam, where they have the water squares, collecting water from the surrounding streets and buildings, collecting them in extreme events, and then have them slowly infiltrated or released to the sewage system. So one design was based on that example. Another design was based on the Place de la République in Paris, where they have introduced a lot of street trees, beating heat events. And a third example was inspired by the Tessingerplaats in Copenhagen, where they have a whole neighborhood turned it into a climate resilient area, also introducing green water retention, connecting surrounding streets and buildings to the water collecting infrastructure. So in the end, this third example has been chosen as the one we want this square to look at, and the realization of this project will be for this year. So really looking forward to that change. So with that, I wanted to finish my presentation and also stress the importance of exchanging experiences and having contact between the different cities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maike, for the presentation and sharing the experiences from Ghent. There is one question already for you. I encourage the audience to type down their questions for you and for the next presentation by George Cristino. Now I give the floor to George for his presentation.
Hi, hello everyone, morning, and thank you for the opportunity and for the invitation from Covenant of Mayors. Well, first of all, of course, this is the main question that was the invitation reason. Anyway, before that, as can't make the presentation, let me introduce you Guimarães. Guimarães is in the north of Portugal, in the south of Europe, very western, with 50 kilometers from the coastline, within total of 157,000 inhabitants, in a total area of 2,040 square kilometers, and is and have 48 parish and urban centers, including the historical center, and is also an industrialized territory. Besides that, Guimarães is the fifth city that exports more in the country. So this, it is in the North Tree in the Arve Valley, as I said, very industrialized, and it's typical rain winters and very hot summers also. This city is the birthplace of Portugal, the national identity, with the first king, the first castle, and it was 1,000 years ago, and is UNESCO World Heritage since 2001, classified by UNESCO. In 2012, it was European Capital of Culture with more than 5,000 events in 1 year. So it's a very, very dynamic city. And of course, in 2013, it was European City of Sport, in a promotion of the sport for all and the wealth and well-being options in terms of physical activity. Well, back into the question, adaptation for us since the beginning was a priority. Identify the risks and prevent them. also define strategy. And that's why we were involved in a national program that was the Climadat Local, and that develops local strategies for adaptation, climate change adaptation. Well, we implement that strategy integrated and in a transversal and horizontal way, seeing all indicators areas with a lot of investment and actions that also measures 28 actions to implement to adapt the climate change. And then, of course, monitor these actions is essential. That's why we also implement this ADAM methodology that also can be, for your interest, you can also search in these websites. But it's a cycle that we have to begin all the time to monitor and also to identify permanently the current vulnerabilities in the territory. Well, in this assessment, we identify the main risks and vulnerabilities. It's pluvial and fluvial floods, also wind, and with the hot summers, also industrial, urban fires and forest fires. So this was the main risks that we are have in this region. So with this strategy, we estimate the main climate change. First of all, also because Guimarães, as you can see also in this map, we have more than 300 water lines with the main river that is the Ave River, and also others that are, well, all over the territory. And you have this climate change that we forecast was the decrease of average annual precipitation, increase of the annual average temperature, especially in the maximum one in the summer, decrease of the number of frost days, and this is very important also for the agriculture, and increase of extreme precipitation phenomena. So in one year we have less rain, but when it rains, it's more strong and more intensity. So also with the risk matrix, we also calculate the main climate impact in terms of frequency of the occurrence and also the impact one. So we with local strategy, we integrate all solutions. So we did it not only bottom up, but also top down. And this picture, it also shows that with the mayor and the team, also with the University of Minho rector team, that we look for all in the 3D platform that we call the City Lab, and we planning the urban territory with these main vulnerabilities. So the vision was to be a reference in the model city, also because medium-sized city is 7% of European cities. So we want to be seen as a reference and have a recognition of this climate change adaptation, and through the implementation of continuous improvement process. This is essential also to have this continued process of municipal action. Then with the local strategy that was spread in at national level, we create with another 28 municipalities a national network of the municipal local climate change adaptation. This is what this was created in 2016, and this is recognized like as an international pioneer project, although it's a national network, but it's already recognized as international good practice. So, and talking about good practice, first one, it was a manner that we want to manage the territory with the horizontal way, integrated management. So we create a mission structure with the 4 universities, with the United Nations University, that is the headquarters of the mission to governance in Guimarães. Also, 3 regional, 1 national university, University of Minho, also UTAR, National University in the north of the country, and also the IPCA, it's a polytechnic institution that also is have the headquarters in the region. So with all these 4 universities and the municipality, we make a strategic cooperation linking between knowledge and experience. And we foresee all the action plans until 2030. This is the Sustainable Development Plan, Guimarães 2030. And have the participation in a global advice committee with more than 400 institutions that we meet frequently, giving a thematic and limited expression to talk about, and not only to talk, but also to work about these each indicators areas. So another good practice is the landscape laboratory. The landscape laboratory is a pioneer project that links between also universities and the municipalities, but this only for research, development, and the educational center for sustainable development of the territory. Not only have the mission to awareness and sensitizing the community for the sustainable development, but also with a lot of projects in the territory. But this is a research applicant research in the territory, very practical. And we have a lot of projects like monitor the rivers in terms of quality of the rivers, but also the urban fluvial runoff of the precipitation. And biodiversity projects, we have 4 main areas: hydraulics, geography, ecology, and urban environment. So another more practical good practice, it was retain basins. Until 2013, there was like 4 or 5 floods in the city center per year. And it was a lot of, and it have, of course, a lot of losses, and of course, there was a lot of inhabitants in the city center that was have the impact of this flood. In 2013 and 14, the municipality constructed 3 retain basins before this area of this flood area in the city center. In total, with 25,000 square cubic meters, and this was built with nature-based solutions, with the recovery and the restoration of the fluvial area. So this area was until before was impermeabilized with a parked car, and then we would give space to the river and construct a natural with in terms of ecological space to the river and the caudal of the river. In 1 year, we have in the first year we have 87 cycles in total, with 2 million cubic meters of water retained in this retained basis. So another one is a building that was a reference, and it is a reference that we make with all in terms of the infrastructures, making this building a zero carbon building with a rainfall water reservoir, geothermal energy, solar panels, and photovoltaic panels. And this is the building is sorry, someone is okay. And the building is covered by cork, as you can see, in the total of 2,000 square meters of cork. So this building is a reference not only because of these all main systems, but also because it was in an area that was supposed to have urban construction with houses, and the mayor decided not to authorize this construction and put a reference building in an area that is green area that was supposed to build other buildings, and also because of the service that have. These are sport facilities. In terms of gym, we have to combine in terms of interior temperature in 18 degrees, so in winter or summer. So is the regulation of temperature is making automatic with all these sustainable systems without normal energy. So another good practice, and I think the final one, is the Guimarães More forest that is also integrated in the main strategy that is Guimarães More Green. And this project is have the classification of the natural heritage area, very close to the city center. Have the project of the monitor of invasive species. Have also the main objective to plant 30,000 native trees per year, with creating of biodiversity strategy plan and also biodiversity routes, and also have the scientific project in the laboratory landscape. This is the landscapes unit project to identify and protect this unit landscape. Besides that, and then they also, because it's important, we have a project in terms of urban fluvial runoff, like bio whales that are building in the city center to prevent the small floods in the street. Besides, we have to make this all this with the community engagement. This is very important. Not only the young one, but also in schools, but also the older one. We have a lot of programs that have this engagement, and it makes the difference to have success in these all adaptation projects. So, as I said in the slide before, this is all important if you have monitor all indicators and evaluate, assess this one. So we make this first of all in national level with ECO 21 municipality, and for the second year we are the most sustainable municipality in the country in this assessment program. Of course, also the Global and Covenant of Mayors we see as a monitor and the evaluation of all this process, and this is very important. That's why we also submit the SECAP for 2013 with the objective to reduce 40% of carbon emissions. Also in the carbon disclosure project, and this is very important, we submit for the second year, and this is a very good reference, and fortunately also combine this year with the Global Covenant of Mayors. We also made the calculation of the local footprint, and this is a very nice and good tool that may also give us our overshoot day. Our overshoot day in Gemini is 13 June, and we make already 2 years, and you see that can improve this our footprint, ecological footprint, and also the calculation of our bio capacity. It means also, and it gives us also an important picture that the overall emissions it's not in the energy and mobility, but it is in the food and in the consumption. So now we also implement strategies to reduce the consumption, also to have more sustainable and health food policies to promote this concept of local consumption. Also, with the partnership with the United Nations University, we are linking all our actions with Sustainable Development Goals as an assessment tool. And of course, our applicant, we submit for European Green Capital in 2017 for 2020, and was Lisbon who wins this year, and also we congratulate Lisbon for that. Anyway, we want to back again to run this recognition, not because only the prize, but also because you can see as the assessment tool. That's why I put it here in the monitor of indicators. And thank you for the opportunity. I think that I have a lot of questions. I was looking while I was...
Yes, thank you very much, and I hope the sound was clear for everyone. We received a few indications it was not loud enough. For us, the sound was good, but maybe I could ask the audience to make sure to increase their own audio, and hopefully this works. I will start with the first question, which was addressed to Maike. It comes from Claire, and she would like to have a bit of more clarity about the concept of vulnerability or risk maps, which one you are working with, and as well as what is the methodological backbone of the assessment indicators and maps the city of Ghent is using. So Maike, over to you.
Hi, here I am again. Well, the concepts of vulnerability or risk maps, usually with risk assessments, focus on the projected changes in climatic conditions, on the inventory of impacted assets, the likelihoods of the impact happening and the consequences. It's more the impacts of climatic hazards, and that's the main concept we have been working on, and we have developed maps on. The vulnerability assessments usually emphasizes more the exposure, the sensitivity, also the adaptive capacity of systems, of populations, and we have worked less on that. So it's mainly the maps. And making these risk maps, the methodological backbone, it has been really modeling work. It has, for example, for the heat map, we have the Flemish Institute for Technology. They have developed the URB-CLIM model, which introduces or combines meteorological data, soil data, urban data, calculating the urban heat island effects under current circumstances or future situations, And then this indicator, this urban heat island effect, is combined with vulnerable, with data on vulnerable people to get the impact. Also for flooding, it was based on modeling, starting from a sewage system model, introducing rain events with different return periods, calculating flood depths, and translating those flood depths into economic costs, damage to houses, to roads, to vital infrastructure, and so on. So I hope that's an answer to the question from Claire.
Thank you very much, Maike, for this exhaustive answer. Now I will turn this question to George, although maybe if you can add something on top, Maike, this will be great. It comes from Pride, and she's referring to the pressure that cities face when there is additional build-up in the city centers. And she is asking whether you have experience with this. Also, if there are some cities or universities who have studied how much the percentage of urban space should be kept open or green. So, George, maybe you can address this issue, and Mike could add maybe after this.
Yes, can you hear me better?
Yes, I can hear you better.
Okay. Yes, but of course, we plan this impermeabilization of the urban areas, not only in the area that we study, but also in terms of our territory, between if you have rivers or water lines that is adjacent to that territory that we study. So this is very important because when it rains, in the example of Guimarães, we aren't a planned city, a flat city. So it's normal when we rain, there's also a delay in terms of runoff of the rainfall. That is important to study, and we make this also calculation. And of course, when we study that, it's not only important to have this data, not only because to prevent floods nowadays, but also to see the percentage that we need in terms of green permeabilization area and impermeabilization that is necessary. Also, with the functionality of the pluvial system, also it is important, and there's a lot of good examples, not to put in the pluvial system, but also to link directly to the underground waters, and also this is a good solution that we are studying in these cases. Anyway, there's not a magic formula that we could say that it should apply to every area, because also depends that you have in that area, not only in the area, but also in the terms of near and adjacent area, when it, of course, we talk about the floods risks.
Thank you, George. And Michael?
Yes.
Do you have anything to add?
Maybe, yeah, maybe some information really on the green space needed. In our in Ghent we use some green space standards which define that we want a green recreational area within 400 meters of everyone's house. So everybody has to reach green within 400 meters. and that green area has to be a park at least 1 hectare big, and it has to provide 10 square meters, 10 square meters per person. So if the neighborhood has 2,000 inhabitants, it will have 20,000 square meters of park needed. For new developments, that area is increased to 20 square meters per person. Now we've calculated that on top of this green space that has mainly a recreational function, but of course contributes to the climate resilience of the neighborhoods. But on top of that green area, we want 7% of all hardened surfaces in a new project needed as extra room for water retention. So we would calculate all the new building blocks and the new roads and new squares. It takes 7% of it and add this next to the green space standards as room needed for water. So I think that might be an indication, some information for Brian.
Thank you very much, Mike. And then one question for both of you. Imagine, well, if it's a city that's just starting to undertake their risks and vulnerability assessment, now that you have gone the path, what would be your piece of advice to a city? Where would you suggest they start? Who would be the relevant people to contact, or maybe where to draw their data on? And so, in general, what would be your advice to those cities who are just starting to undertake risks and vulnerability assessments? Maybe, George, if you could start. You can add later if you remember.
Yes, I can start and say that, of course, there's a lot of criteria to run the assessment, not only technical, but also global in general. First of all, of course, it's in terms of global, you have the awareness of the policymakers, the policy decisions. It is very important to have their awareness to go through this assessment and also to pass this information and communicate in terms of community. Also the awareness of the community to have their participation in terms of the risks and vulnerabilities, because there's a lot of them that are more from the popular knowledge in terms of territory that some municipalities have. And also in terms, of course, of technical part, and this is very important to have modern tools. I think that a lot of data that is not only the risk maps and the vulnerability maps that we can have today, but in terms of GIS, in terms of georeferential information system, this is very important to work with these tools, of course, and to make all the data and statistics of the frequency of the occurrence, to have a story, a historic of these occurrences. It's very important, and also then be very concrete and realistic in terms of the actions to adapt. Not only big projects, but local projects. That's why we really do believe that the multi-level governance in terms of city is very, very important to implement this local action. Also, like Kent present with the example in the neighborhood with several possibilities, and this is a very, very local and realistic project that we can do in all over the cities. So that's why this is also important.
Very good. Thank you so much, George. And Mike, maybe you can add your piece of advice.
I think George's advice was very complete and mentioned the different levels, both the political awareness, the technical, theoretical partners needed, yeah, the multi-level approach. Maybe two advices. I also mentioned it in my presentation. We found it very important to make to test the theory to the practice and gather as much information from people with local knowledge and terrain knowledge, and to 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 make a final check of the results of all the study work being done, and also then disseminate it within the city organization, because usually you have one or two departments that work specifically on this topic, but there are many more departments needed to realize the measures or the overall ambition of a climate resilient city. So it's very important to make sure that the study work that and the available, the information available, translating into measures is spread between all the departments of the city.
Great, thank you so much, Mike, for your presentations and sharing your experiences. I suggest that if the audience has some questions to you, they could write them down in the chat window. We will have another opportunity to address questions in the second part. Now we'll move on with a bit of more practical oriented session where Alexandra and Carlo would present two tools for assessing risks and vulnerabilities at local levels. They will do so through a demonstration. Therefore, I will stop sharing my screen and ask Alexandra to share hers. While she does so, again, to the audience, please get ready with your questions and type them down in the chat window. We will address them after the two demonstrations. So, Alexandra.
Hi, hello everyone. I hope that you can hear me okay. First of all, many thanks to the Covenant of Mayors for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to speak today at this webinar. I would like to talk about a tool on Climate Adapt website called the Urban Adaptation Map Viewer. I am sure that many of you are very familiar with Climate Adapt, but for those who aren't, I just wanted to say that it's an European climate adaptation portal, which is a partnership project between the European Environment Agency and the European Commission. So it's managed by the European Environment Agency with the support of our partners in the European Topic Center on Climate Change Impact, Vulnerability and Adaptation. It was the whole portal was evaluated in 2017 and very thoroughly revised in 2018. So it was just launched at the end of January. So it's sort of hot off the press. So please go and check it out. Today I would like to talk about the Urban Adaptation Map Viewer. And on the Climate Adapt portal, it sits in the knowledge section under tools. So it's here just next to the Urban Adaptation Support tool that both Petya and Maike referred to in their presentation. So we go to Urban Adaptation Map Viewer. And it is a very visual tool. So the first thing I would suggest to anyone is actually to scroll down and click here to open it in a new tab as a sort of full view window. So yeah, that's much better. So the aim of this tool is to provide an overview of the climate hazards facing the European cities, both currently and with some climate projections, as well as present this European overview of the city vulnerabilities and adaptation activities. We also have some information on individual cities in the city fact sheets that are available for the cities that are listed in the Urban Audit or the City Statistics by Eurostat. So The tool has a very simple structure. It's just this one page with 10 tabs. And the only other thing is a separate page listing the data sets that are being used with some additional information about the processing of data and the underlying data sources. But we will come back to that at the end. So the tabs, the first 6 of them are structured alongside the climate hazards. We also have a tab on social vulnerability and adaptation activities, and the final tab, which is not a map tab, on the sort of individual city statistics. So, for example, if we look at the heat tab, all these tabs have very similar structure. So on the left we have some text which is effectively saying what the problem is, why is it particularly relevant to cities, and how can cities adapt. And at the bottom there are some links to useful resources, some EEA reports, more information about indicators relating to climate hazards, but also to physical characteristics of the cities, the links to relevant sections of Urban Adaptation Support Tool, and also to Climate Adapt database, sort of pre-sorted according to the urban criterion and heat. But what is the essence of this tool is actually the map. So here it opens with this sort of predefined 2 layers, which shows a layer of hazard, then a projected number of extreme heat waves in a near future, and a layer of vulnerability, which here is looking at the percentage of lone pensioner households in the households in any given city. As we know from experience that then older people living on their own are particularly vulnerable to hazards. So, for example, if we look at, we can zoom in. If we look at some cities in Bulgaria, we can see that it's one of the areas where the risk of heat and the proportion of elderly people living on their own is quite high. And we can get more information about any given city by clicking on it. So we can see that, for example, in the city of Plovdiv, we have 12% of lone pensioner households in the city. And we can also view some additional information here. So, of course, the country is Bulgaria. And we, according to the climate projections, we can see that in the near future we can expect sort of 1 extreme heat wave every 5 years or so. So these are the sort of predefined layers that open first, but if you click on this icon here, you can see the other list, the other layers that are relevant to this topic. So, for example, we can see not only the layers relating to the future hazard, but also to the observed climate characteristics. So if we switch these off, we can, for example, see to what extent or how many sort of combined hot days and warm nights a year we can see in the European cities. So if we zoom out again, we can see the European overview. One thing that has been mentioned by both the speakers is the importance of the green space in cities in terms of adapting to climate change. So we here have a map showing the percentage of green space in the urban morphological zone, and what we mean by the urban morphological zone is the sort of the what would be the reflection of the real city, sort of the densely built up areas. So we can see, for example, if we zoom into Italy, that the city of Terni has quite a high proportion of green space in the urban area, which could be useful in terms of the adaptation. And if we click on this icon here, we can see the legend. So actually we can see the colors that correspond with different values that can help us understand the map. So if we, for example, look at the risk of pluvial flooding, which was also discussed by the previous speakers, we can see the overlay of the information that relates to the sort of corresponding factors to pluvial flooding. So here we have the factors of precipitation. So here we have the past trends in extreme precipitation. And with these symbols, we have the proportion of impervious or sealed surfaces within the urban areas. So if we zoom in, we can see that, for example, in one of the cities in Poland, there is a quite high proportion of impervious areas, and yes, indeed, in the city of Leszno, over 60% of the urban area is actually sealed surfaces. So even though we can see that the trends in extreme precipitation is actually decreasing, the city can still have some problems with pluvial flooding. So the other climate hazard tabs follow similar logic, but let's look now at the social vulnerability map, which is actually showing the sort of selection of information mainly from Eurostat that can be used as a proxy for the vulnerability of the population in any given city. So here we have the factors relating, for example, to the age of the population. We can see that some European countries have much older population than others. We can see as before the percentage of lone pensioner households, especially as the sort of especially vulnerable group, but we also have some socio-economic factors that might affect the vulnerability of people. The unemployment, of course, related to income, or also some other things such as the percentage of people born in another country in the population, which might have implications for the ability of those people to understand, for example, the information about the local area or the emergency messages in the case of flooding or heat wave. Another tab we can look at is the tab relating to the adaptation activities of cities. And here, for example, can click on the layer list again. We have the information about the signatories to Covenant of Mayors on adaptation. It is not a live map, but it provides a status from sort of mid-2018, and we aim to update this information every 6 months or so. But we also have information, for example, drawing on recent research which investigated which of the cities that are listed in Urban Audit or City Statistics by Eurostat actually have an adaptation plan. We can also see the cities participating in global initiatives such as Making Cities Resilient, and also cities that have participated in EU-funded research projects or EU LIFE programs relating on adaptation. So this is not just a sort of a stock-taking exercise, but also an opportunity to see, for example, which cities in your country or in your region have been active on adaptation, and be able to link up with them, and for this exchange of experiences that's been emphasized by, especially by Maike in her presentation. So these are the map tabs, and the final tab is a bit different. It's not a map, it's a sort of a summary of the information for individual cities. So it's available for the cities that are listed in Urban Audit. There are about 900 cities in Europe, and this information provides sort of 4 sections. So we have the section on observed and projected climate, on land cover and exposure to hazards, on the city's vulnerability, and on adaptation activities. So here we are looking at the city of Pamplona in Spain, and this table provides a summary of the climate hazards that were shown visually through the maps. Here we have just a summary of those, and also these charts provide information how, in comparison to other urban audit cities, Pamplona ranks on different climate hazards. So we can see that in terms of the cooling degree days, forest fire danger, or the risk of droughts, it's actually quite high in the rankings, so the risks are higher compared to other European cities. In terms of the precipitation, it's actually expected to decrease in winter, hence the risk of pluvial flooding might be decreasing. Similarly, in relation to land cover and exposure to hazards, we can see how the city ranks in relation to other cities on the percentage of green space. We can see the percentage of sealed surface in the city area, looking both at this administrative area of the city, the core city, or the sort of selected more urban areas. We can see that in this particular city, actually, the percentage of sealed surface has been increasing through both the expansion of the city and probably the densification of the urban core. We can see that over 10% of the city area can be exposed to river flooding, and that very small percentage of the city population and the city area has been affected by forest fires between 2000 and 2017. We also have the section on vulnerability, so it's listing some of these data on socioeconomic characteristics of the population. For some of them, there is no data in Eurostat for this particular year. And we also have information coming from EU-funded research projects that have categorized European cities according to their climate risks and vulnerability. So the Ramses project included this city in a group of cities with relatively high vulnerability to droughts, medium to high vulnerability to floods, and medium to high vulnerability to heat waves. And according to a Resin project, the city is in a group called Southern Lands, and which has certain characteristics. Also, based on the Resin project, we provide information here about cities that are of similar size and have similar characteristics to facilitate this exchange of knowledge, to enable the city to find cities in Europe that can be in a similar situation and can provide information about their responses to these particular risks. And we also have this information here about adaptation activities, and according to the sources we have used, the city of Pamplona is actually not in any of those initiatives, hasn't participated in EU-funded research projects, and so on. So you can select the city here, and the list is alphabetical, so it's a bit of a pain sometimes to find the city. So let's look at another city that's close to Pamplona alphabetically. So the city of Paris, for example, has different characteristics, but we can see that it has sort of, it ranks above average for all of these hazards and below average in terms of green space. It can be affected by flooding and so on and so on, but we can see that it also has an adaptation plan. It is a signatory to the Covenant of Mayors, a member of Making Cities Resilient campaign, and it has participated in some research projects. So that's about it when it comes to the Urban Adaptation Map Viewer. As I said at the beginning, there's just one more section which provides information about the data set. So if you click here, you can see the list of the data sets that are presented in the map viewer, and if you click on them, there is some basic information about the processing, then data sources that are available, and if you are familiar with GIS, you can open this layer in either the online map viewer or in your desktop application. So that's it from me. I just wanted to say that we are, of course, very interested how this information can be used by city practitioners, but also other organizations. So if you use the information covered either by the maps or by the city fact sheets, I would be really interested to hear from you and find out how you have used it, how you applied it in practice, and we hope that this information can also help to make this tool more practical and more relevant to city practitioners. So thank you very much. That's it from me.
Thank you very much, Alexander, for this demonstration in an interactive way. And indeed, what seems to be a very exhaustive and extensive tool. Hopefully, cities do avail of its possibilities and share feedback how they have used it. We will take the questions addressed to you after the presentation of our next speaker, Carlo. If he will do a presentation via demonstration as well, so maybe he can share his screen now. He would talk about the Copernicus program, the project they are currently developing. It's still also ongoing, and a lot of things are being released on the spot, but let's hear more from Carlo. I give you the floor.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you or there with you in this webinar. It's a great opportunity, and so I would like really to thank the organizer and the Convent of Mayor for this opportunity. So I'm Carlo Buontempo. I will be talking about the Copernicus Climate Change Service. And in a sense, I will be starting a bit from where the previous speaker has left, so very much to focus on the data. So I'm a physicist by training. I now work for ECNWF, which is probably one of the organizations that has the most difficult acronym to pronounce, but it is one of the center of excellence in many respects that you never heard of. Is the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecast. And we are the organization that makes weather predictions and underpins a number of weather predictions each one of us use every day. But we are also the organization that runs and manages on behalf of the European Commission one of the 6 services of the Copernicus service, of the Copernicus program. So the Copernicus program is the Europe's eyes on Earth, so it's a satellite program to monitor the Earth, and alongside the space component, so that is managing the launching of satellite, the retrieval of the data, and so on. There are 6 services, one of which focuses on climate change. So I will be talking about climate change, and then towards the end I will get to something that is more directly relevant to you. And why I want to start with this big picture, because actually we are facing a major challenge, and all the speakers have alluded in some shape or form to it, which is how to manage the changing climate and how to have information that is reliable to inform policy and to drive action. The source of information on climate is becoming more and more important, because adapting to one, to a scenario that is too pessimistic, for instance, may mean extra cost. On the other hand, taking an over-optimistic scenario may actually lead to unnecessary vulnerability. So, well, there are a number of people who have contributed to this talk, and you can see their name here, but they're all based here at the CNWF. So I want to start, if I can change. Yeah, I want to start with something practical. So our mission is really to operationalize climate services. So as we have done with weather prediction that now are routinely produced and you can rely upon, we want to do the same for climate information. Climate information is a number of different things. It's observation from the past, is observation from satellite, is reanalysis or reconstruction of past weather, but it's also seasonal prediction, it's also climate projections, it's also regional projections for Europe or even for local scale. So an example of what it means to operationalize climate service is given by this climate bulletin that we produce every month. So these are an analysis of what has happened in the last few weeks, in the last few months, and then there is an overall analysis at the end of the year. And there are a couple of key principles in our program. One is that what we present is based on data that is publicly available and openly accessible, as is the case for EEA. And actually, I must say that we are working very closely with EEA, and more so in the future. And the second principle is that as much as practically possible, all we do is fully traceable. So if you see these maps, it's not yet the case, but very soon all the processes that went into the preparation of this map will be available for you to scrutinize and criticize if you feel. So the center of the program is the so-called climate data store. So the climate data store is a standardized entry point to a huge wealth of climate data, and that's our core mission, to provide easy access to data that is distributed all over the world, whose quality is not always guaranteed, and which use different standards, and it's not easy to navigate. So we want to make access to this data simple. We want to ensure that the quality of what you find on the climate data store is high and well documented. We want to ensure you can use it for any application. So you can come to the climate data store, and the climate data store is live. So if you go on the website and you navigate from there, you can access it. And the climate data store, you can find, as I was mentioning, observation, reanalysis, projection, seasonal forecast, as well as a number of data sets of indicators relevant for applications. So each data set comes with a lot of information. So there is an overview that is not too technical. It's quite is designed to be read by anyone in the public. There is a download tab that allows you to retrieve the data. And this is all for humans, but there is also clearly a data layer that is entirely machine readable. So there is an API to retrieve the data and process it, should you want to do so. But there is also a human readable interface, which provides information about the data set, as I was saying, a way to retrieve it, information about the quality, documentation, as well as a sample application that shows you how the information, how the data can be used in practice. So just to make it tangible, there's a quick video. There's our website, and you can click on the climate data store. Get there. It looks a bit like Google. You can type the keyword you like best. In this case, I'm asking for temperature, and this returns all the data set that have something to do with temperature. So let's pick one specific data set, and this provides you with information about how this data set was put together, how you could use it, and how you can download it. And if you want, you can select specific facet of the data set and retrieve it. In the interest of time, I think I can skip the rest of this video, but you can go there and play with it, and if you have any doubt, you can ask for support, because one of the things of being operational is the fact that we have a user support team that can respond to any query you may have on the data. So let me see if I can skip to the next one. But it's not the first portal of climate information. There are many portals of climate information out there. There have been many available before. There is, though, an interesting and in some respect unique aspect of this portal, which is that it comes with a computational layer. So the data we are dealing with is often very big. When I mean very big, I'm talking about petabytes of data. So this is not data set that you can easily handle. And if you want to do any sort of analysis, especially for high resolution fields that are needed for cities, then you need to download large volume of data, which is often not practical. So what we have done has been to put a computational layer, and you see some of these big computers, which are not particularly nice to take a picture of in these images. But basically the idea is that you can do some of the processing close to the data and then retrieve the little bit of information that you need without moving around petabytes of data. So again, just to make sense of what I'm saying, it means that rather than looking for a data set, on the catalog, you can also look for an application. So these are all applications, and if you click on an application rather than a data set, what you have is an interface that is dynamic, and in this case it plots you the average temperature for 2018, and you can zoom in and look at the average temperature for Europe for that year, and so on. And these are not static, these are generated on the fly for you based on the data that is available. So there is full traceability of the data. But furthermore, there is full traceability of the process that has gone into these maps. So if you want to see how this was done, you can look at the code. Don't worry if you don't understand code. There is always someone near us who's better at these things than we are, and we can ask them to do it. But logically is important. So there is not a black box. It's something that is entirely scrutinizable and people can work with. And you can take this piece of code, copy and modify, it's all open source, and generate your own plot. So in this case, the interface was very simple. It was just a way of doing maps, a plot of temperature. But you can do the same, you can use the same system to do something that is way more complex and way more interesting in a sense for application. So we have procured specific demonstrator of the technology for specific sectors. So this is one example for energy, and in this case you're looking at predictions in the top right panel and projections, sorry, the other way around. Projections in the top right panels of PV, so solar photovoltaic energy. I think this is for Italy, and in the bottom one is the seasonal prediction of PV power for for Serbia in this case. But the idea is that you have information that goes beyond the climate. So, for instance, the one on the top right is a combination of the changes in the radiation from the radiation reaching the panel and the amount of capacity that is installed in the country as a function of time. So it combines different sources of information, and again, all is traceable and all is available. Similarly, we can do a similar exercise for water. So this has been done using a number of hydrological models downstream of the data available in the climate data store to generate projections of river flow for Europe. And you see, in this case, a snapshot of Europe in the big map, and a specific plot for pretty much the town of Madrid, where the different emission scenarios, so in this case, the business as usual or strong mitigation scenario, lead to very different future, and so very different adaptation responses would be required. So again, this is available and is a demonstrator of the technology. But let me finally get to something that may be more directly relevant to you, and is information for cities. I mean, we heard in the first talk and then again later on the importance of having very high resolution maps. And if you look at heat waves, if you look at the impact on health, both on human health and the impact of heat waves on human health and the indirect impact, so the changes in the frequency, for instance, of outbreak of diseases linked to specific vectors, these are depend on temperature. So having very high resolution information for cities is important. So in this other example, we used an urban clean model run by Vito in Belgium, to provide maps downstream of the data on the climate data store for a number of cities in Europe. So you can use this simulation to simulate the distribution of temperature, both maximum minimum temperature over the country at extremely high resolution. So we're talking hundreds of meters, which is what you need if you want to plan an action, if you want to make an action plan for heat waves in cities. And we have done this for 100 cities in Europe, and this will be this is the list of cities, and these will all be available on the Climate Data Store for you to play with and retrieve. But while I'm sure that this information will be important, the message I want to send out is that this is just a demonstrator. So our goal is not to generate a shortcut or generate yet another source of high resolution information. Is just to show the potential of the infrastructure. So the infrastructure has an incredible amount of very valuable data that is fully traced and is fully characterized and can be used for this sort of application. Clearly, this infrastructure is complex. It requires some knowledge and it requires some expertise. And because of that, we have quite ambitious plan of training. Training is a combination of face-to-face training and online training resources. There will be a number of in-country events. We have already started with a few countries, and more will come, as you can see in the map. And the idea is that we are now training the trainers, and the trainers will themselves train more and more people. So very soon we will have a large number of people who know how to take the maximum out of the infrastructure. We must have done something good in that respect, because we already have 10,000 users active on the Climate Data Store, and it's growing roughly at 100 users a week. So it's a quite steep increase, and we are delivering of the order of tens of terabytes of climate data every day. So it's a very large undertaking. So, well, I'm just reaching my conclusion. It's just to say that Copernicus Climate Change Service has developed an infrastructure that makes simple for user, for anyone to access freely and in an unrestricted way an unprecedented amount of quality control climate data. The infrastructure comes with a computational layers that allow manipulation of the data, even complex manipulation of the data, without the need of retrieving the data, and so without the need of having big computational resources at the end on the side of the user. And we are working on a series of demonstrators that shows how the infrastructure can be used for specific application, and clearly urban areas is one of those. So stay tuned, because soon there will be much more relevant information available on the platform. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Carlo, for this presentation and yet another very, very useful tool. And immediately, a few questions to you related to these tools. I will start with Alexandra first. There was a question regarding the data. First, the source of data, where it comes from, and also the frequency of updating this data. Can you clarify on this? And also, related to this, there was a question that different layers are opening up for one of our attendees. If there are some limitations, something that needs to be downloaded, or it's maybe a singular case.
Okay, thank you for the questions. I'll start from the data sources, and as I mentioned, there is this page associated with the map viewer that lists all the data sets, and it provides also information about the sources. But in a nutshell, we used Eurostat for the socioeconomic data. We use the information that's been processed for the existing EEA indicators on climate and climate change. Also, some of the Copernicus land services data on green space and impervious layers have been processed. We used information from the Joint Research Center, for example, on the burnt areas, on forest fires. We used information from the Commission on the cities participating in various projects. The sort of city initiatives has been sort of done by manually looking at the different programs and initiatives websites and creating lists. So it's been a variety of sources. So hopefully can save some legwork for someone interested in this European overview, and also various researchers and research projects active in this area. In terms of the updates, it's roughly every 6 months, but it also depends on the data. For example, if we want to keep the Covenant of Mayors signatories map up to date, it probably should be more frequently, but we haven't got the capacity to do that so frequently. In terms of the data sets that are coming from Copernicus Land Services, some of them are only updated every 4 years or so, so that would be so that really depends on the data source, but the sort of general maintenance and updates we are planning to do every 6 months. In terms of the data availability, I'm not quite sure if I understand the question. For some of the layers, you need to either zoom in or zoom out to be able to view them. So the urban morphological zones are quite detailed areas in the city, so you need to really zoom in to be able to view that. And for some of them, you need to zoom out to be able to see them. So that is why they are not seen as active. But if it's about the sort of the data not displaying at all, then please do get in touch, and I can check if there is a technical issue.
Well, thank you very much for this exhaustive answer, Alexandra. And now one question to Carlo. You presented the extensive data set that Copernicus is using, and indeed it was mentioned earlier in the speeches, but also it is underlined that the availability of data, both observed and projected, is not readily available. And yet, Esther is saying that at the local scale it seems now to be possible. Could you clarify this, what seems to be a little bit of a contradiction, let's say?
Sure. Yes. Well, I think both statements are correct in the sense that up until very recently, having access to high-quality data was a challenge. It was a challenge in terms of where the data was, and also it was a challenge in terms of which data set should I use. These information are, you need to understand the kind of data available and understand which one is suitable for which sort of application. And there wasn't a standard or a unique entry point where you could start from in retrieving this data. At the same time, Copernicus, Climate Change Service, and a number of other initiatives, I think, are filling that gap. And so it's now possible to retrieve this data, and you don't need to search too much or to look too far. You can come to the Climate Data Store and find a lot of this relevant information. And in a sense, we do some of the work for you because we make a selection of what we think are the most suitable data set around, but we don't judge. In a sense, what we do is to provide the quality information on each data set to allow you to make an informed decision, because quality it depends largely, is in the eye of the beholder, so to speak. So what we need to do is to tell you how that data set was put together, what it has been used for, what are the characteristics of the data set, so that you can make the decision. At the same time, if you find the data set and you don't have time to make this detailed analysis, if you find a data set on the catalog, you can be reassured that it's of good quality, generally speaking. And this is particularly true for high resolution data. So the reanalysis, so the reconstruction of the past weather. So on. Should I continue?
Yes, if you have something more to share additional, I'm conscious that we are very much close to the time scheduled for ending.
Okay, don't worry, it's okay.
If there are more, thank you, Carlo. If there are more questions from our audience, we would be happy to collect them and refer to our speakers for further clarification. What will be shared from our side with all the participants through the webinar would be a full recording of this webinar, including the presentations which have been shared and additional useful information that our speakers have provided. So this package of information will be arriving via email in the next couple of days. And again, should there be any questions, please feel free to contact us. There are some questions coming up at the end of the webinar. Okay, we can take them. And Manuel's questions, I noticed two of your questions. The Covenant of Mayors office will take those bilaterally with you, so we will contact you and clarify your questions related to the action plan template. I see Laura is typing a question. If it's possible to share the link to the measures related to hard services of green area, I think this is a question to Alexandra. We can take those, I think, bilaterally, so that we don't keep anyone from their break and finish within the allocated time. Just a very slight very quick ending slide. As you know, this was the first webinar of the series. We have at least 3 more webinars coming. You can see on the screen the topics plus the tentative timing. We will keep you updated about the exact dates of the webinars, and we hope to see many of you attending these upcoming webinars as well. In order to keep informed, also please follow the Covenant of Mayors website, the social media, mostly Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, as well as the newsletters and the regular communications sent by the office. And with this, I would like to conclude this webinar. I see more questions are coming. We will make sure to take all of these and answer them with the assistance of our speakers after the webinar. And of course, very warm and sincere thanks to all our presenters for sharing their experiences, and I'm happy that everything technically worked fine. There was a slight problem with George's sound, but I hope still it was clear for everyone. And finally, a very big thanks to our audience for their participation, for staying with us. And I hope once again I see many of you at the next series of the adaptation webinars. We will stay tuned, the Covenant Office, for a while to take up the questions. And with this, we finish. And I wish everyone a very nice afternoon. Goodbye.